Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast that deals with the newsletter, or an extension, I guess I should say, of the newsletter of St. John's, Sand Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus. I'm the creative worship director over at Our Savior Lutheran in Washington.
You know, there for a second, I thought maybe you'd say a different church. And the reason is it's been so long since we've actually talked.
I know. It has been.
You know, and I was kind of telling you when I first got here tonight, like, you know, it's just been an absolutely maddening, crazy time for me. And I always say September kind of is that.
Really?
I don't. Yeah. It's like a plague. It's a cursed month. And I say that jokingly, of course. I love September. My daughter's birthday's in September. I absolutely love it. But for whatever reason, I get crazy busy in September, and it's never anything predictable.
Yeah.
Never anything predictable. You know, one year it'll be one thing, and then so I'll get all prepared and ready, and then the next year it's like something completely different. And so I don't know. Something about September. Something about it.
It is crazy. School's kind of getting back into session, but for us, it's like we have like homecoming, like where the band plays and stuff. So you have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot of little things, like a lot of random nights we have to do stuff. So
yeah. Well, it's just a crazy month. Now October, it seems to calm down a little bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's always going to be at least a little bit busy, but I mean, it just seems to calm down in October. So, hey, we made it. It's October 1st.
Yes.
So it's like we made it. I made it to October. Life can slow down a little bit now, and I'll be okay with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, it's been forever. You know, I feel like every time we get together, we're always like, oh, we're going to do this more consistently, and then it doesn't happen. So hey, maybe we'll try again, and maybe it'll work out this time. I don't know, But either way, we're back. We made it back. Here we are. I don't know, you know. But anyway, so what I wanted to start with, so the big story, like we got like almost a month, right?
Yeah.
And so like the big story of the month is P. Diddy. Can we talk for a second about P. Diddy?
Yes.
I mean, so for those of you that live under a rock or just don't care, whichever one you are, I don't really know. I honestly don't care that much, but it's just something that comes on. I guess they busted P. Diddy, who is basically he was like sex trafficking, wasn't he?
Yeah, that was one. Yeah, that was one of the charges.
And he was holding these big parties, and then he would like record like famous people doing things that they shouldn't do, and then from what I understand, probably blackmailing some of them.
Oh man,
you know. But anyway, like it's got a long list of people that are involved with it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to really talk about any of that. I mean, again, look, it is what it is. It's kind of like Epstein, you know, like, you know, he falls and then you see all these pictures with him. And then with every picture, you're like, okay, did this person know what they were doing? And in the back of your mind, you kind of believe like, yeah, I think they do. Yeah. I think they did, you know, and maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just like, okay, he's famous, so I'm famous, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a famous person, so I wouldn't know the answer to that. Yeah. But here's the thing I got like, and this is the thing that just blows my mind. Like, how do people get not even just, on the one hand, I want to say how people get caught up in this, but like, how do all these people run around thinking this is okay?
I don't know. I think it's, I don't know. I think they're just in that world. Like, I saw an interview with Robert Downey Jr., who I think is also associated with P. Diddy in certain ways. Oh, is he? I think so. I think I saw some sort of picture with them together that was saying like, something about they have done stuff together. But like he talked about how he was doing drugs when he was like a child because he was a child actor, and he said you'd just be sitting around on set. And back in the day, like, you know, they would just hand you a joint, or they'd hand you, you know, whatever it was, and it was just like, here you go. Yeah. And so he'd do it because it was just a kid. He didn't know what to do, and so he just like his drug addictions and stuff started when he was like literally a child because he was just there, and they were just like, here you go.
And I know like Drew Barrymore had like a drinking problem by the time she was
major.
like 14 or something.
Yeah, she had a lot.
And it's like, I mean, but again, it's just, I realize like it's such a different world. I realize like, living in that kind of stardom and luxury and yada, yada, yada is just so different. But I mean, man, I just, for my own sake, I just don't get the full disconnect that these people have.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I can't even imagine a world where I would walk through the front door, see what's going on and go, nope. And then just walk out the door and then probably call the police. Cause I'm like, that's wrong. I'm not getting involved in that one. But it's just like, but not only did these people not just turn around and run, but they stayed there.
Yeah.
They did whatever they did and they got recorded and blackmailed and they thought it was all okay.
Yeah. I found, I don't know, in the last few weeks, especially, for a while now, I feel like I've been just this whole, I guess 2024 for me has been like, I am so grateful for my foundation and like my faith.
Yeah.
Because I think I've talked about this before. There's people I've known this year who have they've lost like a pet, and which I understand is hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But had breakdowns to the point of like it could ruin their life breakdown.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, I know it's a pet. I get that that's hard, but you're like, life does go on, but I realize that they don't have that foundation, and to them, I don't know. There's something not there for them, that they don't understand that life will get better, or that, they don't have faith that it'll get better. And even just going through this stuff, it's like, it's amazing. Some of these people who just have they can go into that and think, all right, let's do that. I can't imagine like thinking that's okay.
I mean, again, and like you bring up like Junior, Robert Downey Jr., and I'm like, okay, so he was as a little kid growing up, but like a lot of these guys weren't. A lot of these guys came into stardom later, and they didn't grow up in Hollywood and L.A. and all that. I mean, some of them came from like the Midwest.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just trying to envision somebody from the Midwest. What do they have to go through to where, again, they just walk through the door and they don't just say nope and then walk out? Like what? Like again. And the whole Epstein time thing too, I don't know. I guess I think part of it for me is as I process and try to work my way through this, it kind of as a Christian, and you brought up the Christian foundation. I think that's important. Having a kind of a moral compass is obviously, I think, a huge part of it. But I honestly think some of it has to do, like the Bible tells us that, that money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now notice, I always say that, like, it doesn't say it's the root of all evil. A lot of people say it is. It's not. It's not the root of all evil, but it is the root of many kinds or of a lot of different kinds of evil. And I do think that at least part of it for our own world is that they think that they're invincible.
Yes.
And I think when people honestly believe that they are invincible in one capacity or another, I'm not saying that they don't believe they're mortal. Maybe they're like, okay, well, I'm mortal, but even if I got caught, I wouldn't be going to jail or prison. I'm too rich. I'm too wealthy. I'm too, beyond the realm. And whenever you get to a mindset like that, I think it changes a person. Like to honestly think that, to honestly really, really fathom that I can do whatever I want and have absolutely no consequences for my action.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it comes. I mean, think about it. Like, we all have evil in us. We're all, we all have sinful desires of the flesh and all that. Imagine you got to let those run rampant and then completely unchecked. After a while, your sinful desire is probably going to get boring, especially if you can just do it at will whenever you want to.
Yeah.
And eventually your sinful desire is going to twist and go into a different direction. And all of a sudden you're going down this rabbit hole of basically awful sinful behavior and desire.
Right.
And who knows where it ends up? Apparently with P. Diddy, it ends up with all kinds of things.
Yeah.
What was it, like 1,000 bottles of Johnson & Johnson baby oil?
Yeah, it was just, yeah. Well, and I think it also, how people get to that point, I think partly is who they surround themselves with.
Well,
and
sure.
Especially Hollywood. Like, I think I've told this at some point, but I worked in a concert venue, and we had an artist who had a reunion this band doing a reunion tour.
Yeah.
They broke up because the singer was a drug addict and an alcoholic. And so finally he cleaned up. They did this tour together after like 20 years. And lo and behold, he fell back into it. He had a big meltdown on stage. The whole band packed up all their equipment and they took off and they just left him there at the venue. So it was him and the manager. And then they hired a couple other musicians to come fill in for the rest of the tour. And when they were at our venue, the manager the whole time was just telling this guy, "You're the real talent. Those guys are a bunch of, they're a bunch of hacks. You're the one who really made this band what it was." And I mean, I think I watched him for 12 hours tell this guy that he's the greatest thing that's ever walked the earth. And when you're surrounded with that every day, it's just unbelievable. Which kind of brings me to another point of, again, being very grateful and thinking of my foundation. Because I will admit, I think there was a period in my life where I always felt that I'm religious and I always have a strong faith in God. But there was times where I felt like, I'm religious and I believe in God wholeheartedly, but I don't really believe in the church. Like, I don't believe that organized religion is like the best thing. But the more like I've gone through this year and seen other people and the way they've done that, again, who you surround yourself with makes a big difference, in your life day to day. And when you surround yourself with other Christians who are all working towards being good people, having a strong faith, you for some reason start to grow in your faith as well. Like you start to think about it more. And so that I think those people being in like Hollywood or all these places and they're surrounded by just some people who will do anything and can get away with anything. They start thinking, well, I guess I can get away with anything. And often some of those people, like I see that with singers a lot who, they grew up singing in church. That was their background. And then they get in kind of famous and all of a sudden, well, I don't believe in God anymore. And it's like, well, do you surround yourself with any Christians or you only hang out with people who aren't Christians? Yeah. And I don't know, like that, who you surround yourself with is a big, big difference,
Yeah, and I mean, and I absolutely think I agree with you. I mean, the church is a community, and one of the purposes of the church is to actually hold people accountable. You're holding your brothers and sisters in Christ accountable, and so I think that's absolutely a good point. Who you surround yourself with is what you seem to end up being okay with, and so on and so forth.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you too or get you off topic, but one of the things we've talked a little bit about this, but what's really interesting is the amount of there's been a few people. There's these two YouTube guys named Rhett and Link, and they're very, very famous on YouTube. And they came out with a video about how they've decided they're leaving the church. They're no longer Christians. And their reasoning behind it was that we realized one day that everything they were preaching, people in the church weren't really doing it, and even our kids started pointing it out. So if that's how the church is, then obviously we need to reevaluate our faith. And we've talked about this before, that their faith is in the wrong thing. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. But it's sad to me because it's like you need to find a new church then. If you think your church is, if your church is not following God's word, then there are churches that do. Yeah. And maybe you need to go to a new church. Not that I'm recommending abandoning your church, but it's
well, but again, I think there's a difference though between everybody struggling to do the best that they can and they're going to fail, right? Like as human beings, we're going to fail. We're not going to, we can't achieve salvation by our own works. And so there's that truth. And so there's a wild difference between a bunch of people gathered, searching and seeking and trying to do the best that they can do versus a group of people that just want their sins to be accepted, justified, So if you go to a church and the preacher stands up and says something that is sinful and starts to say how good it is and yada yada, okay, that's no good. If it completely contradicts God's word, absolutely, that's no good. Yeah. But if you go to a church and you find a bunch of sinners, don't be surprised, I guess, is the kind of the way. Yeah. I like to say it. Don't be shocked by that. Yeah. There's nothing shocking about it. Mm-hmm. Now, if everybody's just accepting of it and says it's okay, then okay. Then maybe. Yeah. Then maybe. But also realize, this is also part of it too. As I've found in my own, journey, as a pastor, is that, you also have to realize that like people are coming from different walks of life, and where they are might not be where you are. If somebody comes to the church and they're struggling with alcoholism, and they're really struggling with it, but they go out on a Saturday night and get hammered, what they did was sinful. But honestly, if they had 5 days sober and 1 day of drinking, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You failed this time, but you know what? Still small victories. Like, you're making steps in the right direction. I'm not going to stand up in front of the church and go, oh, that person, did you know what no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to walk and talk and see if we can start getting you on the right path. Not you can't be perfect immediately.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of churches out there that are like that, though. That the second you walk through their door, they just expect that you're going to change everything about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And they fail to realize that it is kind of a process.
Yeah. It is.
And the process, by the way, for those of you that are wondering, our $10 word tonight is sanctification.
Sanctification.
That's what it's called, sanctification. Mm-hmm.
That's not like when you die?
No.
Okay.
Sanctification is the process of being made holy.
Okay.
So one could talk about it in terms of death, like, in terms of like you are being made holy, after you die, your sinful flesh, yada, yada, yada. You could talk about it maybe in that light, but the reality is that sanctification is the draw of the Holy Spirit that kind of pushes you towards holier living.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the good Lutheran in me wants to say, yeah, it's not you. It's the Holy Spirit inside of you that keeps pushing you in that direction.
Yeah.
That new creation that God creates in your baptism. But at the same time, like, yeah, that work is a sanctification work. It's a work of sanctification.
Well, and I think what's interesting is, even with someone like those two guys kind of being like, well, we saw our church was being really hypocritical, and so we just thought, well, we're done being Christians or whatever. Like, that's crazy to me. And to be honest, I haven't seen the video. Someone talked to me about it, so maybe they just said they're leaving the church.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't say they're not Christians. I'm not sure. But, on the other hand, there's been several people recently who have started to become Christians. Like we talked about a while back, there's Kat Von D, who's like a famous tattoo artist.
Yeah.
Who she's had kind of a crazy life and everything, and she's converted into being Christian and got baptized and like is living a pretty, like, she's really changing her life around in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And there's Shia LaBeouf became Catholic.
Did he really?
That? He did.
I did not know that.
He did a movie where he was playing a priest, and he went and followed. If you know Shia LaBeouf, he is a very like intense person. Like,
he is. I hope he's able to kind of stick with it.
Yeah. So when he went, he started. He wanted to watch. He wanted to basically like shadow.
Yeah.
These priests, and so he followed them around, and he just over the course of listening to them, and then he started kind of like looking into the scripture a little bit, and he completely converted. It changed his life,
Yeah.
And then have you heard about Russell Brand?
No,
the comedian.
I mean, I know who he is, but no, I haven't heard about.
So he has recently become a Christian as well.
Really?
Yes. And Russell Brand, if you don't know, he's British. And he's a very fast talker.
Yes, he is.
You can tell he's very intense, and he's a very funny guy. He's always been funny. But there's a really great clip of him talking. I think it's like Tucker Carlson. He's talking to Tucker Carlson, and he was saying that he started reading the Bible because he realized he had never read the Bible.
Yeah,
and he says I wish I had not been. I wish I would have not thought I was so clever, that I was smarter than my grandma's religion, and that I was too intelligent for that. And he goes, and then now I'm reading the Bible, and it's blowing my mind on a daily basis. And he's completely like, he's just like fallen into this, and he's like, he brought up all the stuff about how Christians aren't perfect because they're working towards this, and it's all like, it's just his mind. It's like he's totally just kind of been blown away by this whole thing.
Yeah.
And he's now like really intensely, moving towards or like getting involved in this. And so it's kind of interesting because I feel like, for a while there, we definitely had this whole, like, how the country's really starting to lose its religious,
Yeah. And, we always get that. Like that's always the thing. Like every generation says of the generation that's to come, oh, you're losing your path, you're losing your way. And, to be fair, there's always a part of that that's probably true. Like there's certain things that each culture tends to lose, and then there's things that they gain.
Yeah.
And so there's a truth in that. But, like we followed the statistics. I mean, look, if you're really bored, if you're like, man, I'm struggling to get to sleep, Pastor Chris, go look up some of these Pew Research. Again, it's one of those things. Like one of the things that we are seeing is we are seeing a cultural shift. Absolutely true. But the number of, dare I say, solid Christians is actually pretty unchanging.
Yeah.
What we're seeing the fluctuation in is cultural or social Christians. Mm-hmm. Christians that are Christians because of a social structure or because the cultural norms tell them they have to be.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that fly off. And one of the things, and again, just like everything has a blessing and a curse. Mm-hmm. So like the curse is we're seeing our numbers go down. We're seeing churches close. That's sad. We're seeing a lot of communities that are impacted by stuff like this. And, we're also seeing people that used to upkeep certain moral tenets. We're seeing that go away because they're realizing they don't have to anymore because the cultural and social norms don't tell them that they have to.
Yeah.
And so that's all gone away. And that's really heartbreaking. It really is. On the other hand, one of the blessings is that the Christian church, for the first time in almost 2,000 years, about 1700 years, is getting a glimpse at where it really is.
Yeah.
That is to say, we've had so many years, almost 2 millennia of people being Christian for being social.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, from a evangelism standpoint, that's really challenging, right? Mm-hmm. That's why a lot of our evangelism programs, even the way we think nowadays about evangelism programs are completely, there a lot of people just don't know what to do with themselves because it's like, well, a lot of them are like, well, I used to go down a neighborhood and everybody was Christian. Right. Now I go down a neighborhood and nobody's Christian. Like, how do I do this? How do I evangelize? And it's like, well, I always say, like, look, our new member classes, the way we used to do member class. When I first started ministry, actually when I was doing my fieldwork church, so early 2000s, joining a church was an 8-week course. Yeah, mm-hmm. you sat with pastor for 6 to 8 weeks. You read through some book stuff, and you called it a day. Some more vigorous churches were doing 10 weeks or even 12 weeks. Whoa,
oh, wow.
But one of the things I began to notice, and really I've noticed this in probably the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, before the pandemic, but the pandemic I think almost made it more nuanced. But people would walk through our doors, and as a pastor, I would start talking to them. I would realize that they didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Like they didn't know anything. I had one guy, and to be fair, I think this was in Wausau before I came down here. I don't think it was down here, but I remember talking to one guy who didn't even know who Jesus was.
Yeah.
He was at our church, at our service, didn't even know who Jesus was. And but I mean, again, we're starting to see, and I mean, I'm not saying we're seeing tons of visitors just flow through our doors, but every now and again, we have somebody walk through our doors, and maybe they want to go to the church, or they want to see what the church is all about. They know nothing. Mm-hmm. And see, that was just it. The 8-week course assumes that you were raised as a Methodist, a Baptist, a Catholic, a whatever.
Yeah.
And so all we're doing is we're teaching you the Lutheran theology distinction between our theology and that theology.
Right.
And so that's what our main goal is. But whenever you have somebody walk through the doors who doesn't even know who Jesus is, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, this is going to take a little bit longer than 8 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to have to spend a little bit of time here, you know, and actually kind of dig in. And that takes a little bit of time. And I'll be frank. I mean, not everybody goes through it, you know?
Yeah.
I've had some people that started working with me and, you know, I think to say it, I think realizing that it maybe wasn't going to be a fast thing, you know, gave up for one reason or another. You know, and I mean, I know that's not always, and I can't look at their hearts. I don't know, you know, maybe they went to another church. I mean, you know, but at the same time, I just know that they never finished the new member class stuff with me.
Yeah.
You know, but again, it's just wildly different. There's no foundation to build on. You got to build the foundation all over.
Yeah.
But again, that's some of the stuff that we're starting to see is, and that, again, that's kind of a promising thing, actually. That's actually a promising thing. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I don't know if this relates at all. I don't know if this kind of relates, but like I do a YouTube channel as you've talked about before, and there's a lot of people on YouTube. It's like their main focus is like get subscribers, you need to get as many subscribers. And my thing is I've always wanted my views to be more than my subscribers, because I see people who will have 50,000 subscribers and their videos have like 400 views. And I'm like, well, what are those subscribers good for if they don't even watch your video?
And this is a good time to mention that if you want to subscribe to this podcast,
leave us a 5-star review and we may read your review on the air.
We might read it.
But to me, it's kind of like, it's sort of a thing where I can make a video that's maybe a little more broad for people who are less into that niche that I do stuff on. Yeah. And I can say there and go, okay, well, make sure you subscribe, blah, 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 blah. And people probably will subscribe just because when you're told to, you kind of go, oh, okay, fine, I'll subscribe. But they probably aren't going to watch my videos because they don't care that much.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So to me, it's like, I would rather build actual, like, people who I actually would want the people to subscribe to people who really do want to watch my stuff. Versus just okay, I got a big number now. I can like, hey, look at what I'm doing. Sure. You know? So I don't know. I think people coming in without having that background and you getting to be able to start them from the beginning might be an even better thing.
I mean, again, there's pluses and minuses. Like everything has pluses and minuses. I mean, again, I mean, like if you were at a church at its height and you saw the church filled to the brim and you heard the singing and yada, 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 and then you come back to that church like 20, 30, 40 years later and they got like half that, if not a quarter of that, the singing is less robust. It just feels like the church is dwindling. It just doesn't, there's so many things that like, it just seems like, and it breaks your heart when you see it.
Yes,
it does. It does. And you don't want to sugarcoat that. And you also don't want to pretend like that hurt isn't real. Yeah, it is real. But at the same time, again, one of the things that you're seeing is you're seeing that core set of believers. Yeah. As opposed to the ones that are just from a societal standpoint. Now and again, and we'll still have a lot of those ones that are just cultural, societal, whatever. We'll probably have that for another generation or two. Yeah. And again, I would suspect that church attendance will, well, actually, no, I can't say that. I was going to say, I was about to say, I think you'll watch it slowly go down even more. And that might be true, but something else interesting kind of happened. And this is actually really fascinating. It actually has to do, it ties with postmodernism. Okay. So I don't know, how much have you ever studied postmodernism?
So I'm not 100% sure what that means exactly, to be honest with you. So postmodernism, as in before modernism or after? See, I don't even know post is after. Sorry,
pre-modernism is before, post is after.
Yeah. See, I'm not. This is not my.
So expertise. So like I mean, again, and you guys all know I love history. So if you're listening to this, get over it. Pre-modern is like pre-Renaissance.
Oh, okay.
Renaissance sparked a movement kind of called rationalism in a sense. It kind of started off as being this idea of rationalism, and it progressed. And one of the key elements of that idea of rationalism is that man as a whole, like humankind, can in essence do anything. Like you know, it might not happen today or tomorrow, but within this generation or so many generations, you know, through our knowledge, through our know-how, through our abilities, we're gonna do it. You know, we're gonna accomplish it. And each version of this movement is always met with kind of this, oh, dare I say, romantic counterpart. You know, kind of and romantic is not in the sense like romantic, not in the sense of like, oh,
Hallmark?
like a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
Not like that. Not like that. It's been a while since we mentioned those, by the way.
We're going to have to talk about Hallmark again.
Now we're going to talk about Taylor Swift. Anyway.
Yeah. Going back to all the classic tropes.
All the classic tropes. But no, but but each of them had kind of their own like romantic counterpart. So like, you know, rationalism and all that might talk about the nitty-gritty, the in terms of like we need to be precise, we need to do this, very scientific. And then the counterpart would kind of, you know, dare I say, like gloss over and talk about horrible things, but kind of gloss over them and romanticize. I like to say it's kind of like watching two movies on the mafia, right? You know, you watch one,
yeah,
and it's blood and guts and it's awful and it just looks awful, and then you watch The Godfather and you're kind of like, I could get into that. You know, like The Godfather has like romanticized the idea of the mafia.
Yes.
They've made it almost like stoic and you know, and all this. And so that's kind of the way it is. And like, so a big thing that happened, I can't remember, I think it was either late 1700s or 1800s, we saw the dawning of modernism. Modernism had kind of at its like core this idea that science was going to finally do it, going to solve all of our problems.
Yeah.
And science, if we just put enough power into it, if we just put enough money and enough experiments and enough this and enough that, we are going to do it. We're going to fix it.
Yeah.
And started about, I always like to say right around 65, we started to see some cracks. Jacques Derrida, you know, is a linguist. He kind of came up with this idea of deconstruction of the language to basically point out that everybody, in essence, has a bias. And it grew in popularity, but modernism was still huge. It was still huge. And usually there's a couple different things that are credited with the downfall of modernity, of modernism. One of them actually happened in St. Louis. They had these buildings. They were like the projects. They were gonna wipe away poverty, gonna destroy it, get rid of it. We finally did it. You know, we're gonna have science and everything back us up. Well, the buildings and the tenants and everything got so bad that they finally had to destroy the building.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people like equate the destruction of those buildings with the beginning of what's known as postmodernism. Other people tie it with Glasnost. Glasnost was something that the USSR did, the Soviets did, where basically Gorbachev like kind of opened the gates and was kind of transparent, and everybody saw for the first time just how bad a shape Russia was really in. Yeah. And it kind of started the domino effect of the collapse of the USSR. So anyway, so like those are kind of the two things. So right around 1989, 1990, a lot of people say, okay, that's when modernism kind of died, right? Because they had pushed all their science and all their, you know, wiles, and all of a sudden people began to realize that it wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, science and modernity wasn't everything. And with that comes this idea of post-modernity. And post-modernity is really what we're living in now. Okay. Although a lot of people might say we're like even beyond that. But like honestly, this is we're kind of in this postmodern age. Postmodernism it's not that it ignores science, but it kind of puts science on a side. It's kind of like, we're not going to ignore you, but we're not going to listen to you either. You know, and this is where we get like, you know, morality is relative, the eye of the beholder kind of thing. You know, a lot of the people nowadays like running around saying I'm a cat or I'm this or I'm that. Again, it's all about how you feel. Right. And it's, again, it's kind of the romantic reaction and counterpart to modernity. Modernity was cold. It was scientific. It was like laboratory, sterile. It was like, we're going to fix it all by experimenting on it. Whereas postmodernity is a lot more like, you know, we're just going to see how we feel about all this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And morality is relative.
Yeah.
However, one of the counter reactions to that, and this is where I think the church actually realizes it actually has a blessing. We saw a spike in the 90s, and I still think that some of the people are starting to reel from this. And I think increasingly, as we see such a division within our culture, I think one of the things that we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of people go to one extreme or the other. Yeah. And they go to one extreme, and to us, it just seems absolutely crazy. Again, they'll run around saying, "I'm really a cat." Like, well, no, you're not. You're a human being. You know. So whatever. But the other extreme of that, though, is a lot of people are starting to say, "Okay, so this is no good, and modernity wasn't really good. So, like, what do we have that's foundational that actually has some history to it?" Mm-hmm. You know, what can become my foundation? Because postmodernity has no foundation. Yeah, science isn't my foundation, and my feelings go all over the place. So that can't be. So they go, well, what's my foundation? And so a lot of people, and again, this isn't like a big rush or anything, but I think this is something that we are starting to see a little bit. We're seeing younger people that are kind of saying, no, I want something old, ancient, and something firm. Like, I want to see a firm foundation kind of thing. Yeah. And again, from an evangelistic standpoint, the problem is how do you reach out to those people? Yeah. So anyway, but you are starting to see this. Yeah. Honestly, it's even funny. Like even like I get on TikTok every now and again, and like you see the trad wife movement, which cracks me up.
The trad wife?
What's
trad wife?
They are these women that are trying to be traditional wives.
Oh, okay. So you know what? There was also a trend a couple years ago called soft, where it's like called I think it was called soft woman or something, like being a soft woman or something like that.
Okay.
Where it was kind of like, why am I working? I just want to be home and like fix up the house, and then like when my husband gets home, we'll just have a nice evening. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Yeah. And it's just funny. Like there's like hashtags for like tradition, like what you would consider a traditional like kind of normal home or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. But and, well, again, it's fascinating, but like it's out there. It's like these. And it's not just the gals either, by the way. It's guys too. Like, guys are men are starting to venture out, and you're seeing these. It's always funny because you see like these city guys coming out going, "I'm going to chop a log." Yeah, like I'm gonna do this. Like and hey, you know what? I'll give it to them. These guys, a lot of these guys are really trying, and they're trying to do what they think is right, and they're trying to do what's best. So
yeah, well, we've done before. If people, if they've heard the episode where we did a, Mark Driscoll.
Oh yeah,
we did a Mark Driscoll thing, and Mark Driscoll was very much about masculinity. Yeah, and women need to be women, men need to be men, and it probably poured into an unhealthy like. A lot of ways it started pouring into a very unhealthy kind of viewpoint of how that needs to be, kind of putting women down almost to a sense, and but and that's not the way that's supposed to be. But
But he definitely hit a nerve.
But he definitely hit a nerve, and it's like with him, it's always like there's like an ounce of truth to it, and then like there's a lot of unneeded part of it. But there's some truth. Like I've seen, there's some people I know in my life that I've had that thought where it's like, I think you need to just like go get a job and start working 9 to 5, because it's like you're having such a difficult, it's like they're in this limbo of like, I don't know, I'm trying this, I don't know what to do. And it's kind of like, man, if you just maybe make some structure to your life, you probably would be happier in the long, you know, because you actually kind of know what you're doing, and you're not every day sitting around going like, oh, I don't know what to do now, and I don't know if I'm making the right choice. It's, I don't know. There's something to it though about just kind of those traditional values that surprisingly kind of make you happy,
Yeah. But again, it's one of those things like, as postmodernism moves on, and again, you add technology to the mix and it just makes things worse. Not better, but worse. And I mean, again, honestly, like that's a whole other topic for another day, but like it does. I mean, you're seeing a lot of people that just they don't know, they're being pushed to and fro, and they need some foundation, and they're finding it in scripture, they're finding it in tradition, they're finding it in all these things. But again, kind of the side point that I brought up is like, a lot of people talk about Luther and about how Martin Luther translated the Bible into German, and his German Bible is still a great translation from what I understand, but he had study notes that went along with it that were really good. But one of the things that even Luther was concerned about was the fact that people were then going to have access to all this information. Were they going to understand and know how to process it? Yeah. And honestly, it's like 500 years later. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we saw snippets of it here and there, but like it's 500 years later and we're like going, oh my gosh. Again, one of the things that parents need to do today that they don't do, because again, if you're my age, I'm 42. When I was growing up, my parents were the key to all information.
You're right.
Like if I didn't know something, I asked my parents, and a lot of times they didn't know either. But like that was the point though. Like if I needed to know something, I just talked to them, and like I didn't have a phone, I didn't have the internet. And I really didn't even get online until I was in college. It was available in high school, but I didn't use it. I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
But the point of the matter is like, that was where but now kids have phones and they have this and they have that. And it's like, my kids don't need me for information, but they do need me to understand and process the information. Mm-hmm. They need to understand how to seek out good information versus bad information.
Yeah.
So and again, it's kind of back to Luther's point. Like people will have all this information, but do they know how to process it? Mm-hmm. And 500 years later, and we're going, yeah, Luther, you really had a point.
Yeah, that's an idea to think about.
That's something we should probably think about a little bit.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, kind of reiterating what we were talking about, like traditional values and stuff like that, and having those things. Like I'm, and I completely understand. Not everybody has the ability to do this, but it's been amazing for me and my wife, even though we kind of, if you think traditionally, we sort of switch roles. Like I stay at home and she goes work, but just the fact that we can instill, like, I mean, I literally every day I say, please, and like every single time my child asks for a single thing, I say, what do you say?
Yeah.
And they go, please. And I say, put it in a sentence. And I say, can I please have some juice? I'm like, there we go. And I do that every day, all the time. And it's like, I mean, I think for some people they would think, man, that's like a lot of work. And it is kind of, but I am so lucky that I get to be home and I get to instill those things into my child. And then every time I hear them with somebody else say please or say thank you when someone gives them something, it's like, oh man, that makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Makes me so. But I kind of have that ability to have, to be home and to give them the values that me and my wife want them to have.
Yeah.
And again, I know not everybody has that situation, and sometimes you have to like take them to daycare or somewhere. But we're very lucky we get to do that, because I want my kids to be polite kids and to be respectful and, you know, because I think that'll take them very far in life. Versus, you know, being a kid who isn't, you know, but
yeah.
So I don't know. Traditionally, sometimes there's a really good reason for those things, and it's funny how there's people now starting to go, hey, that's kind of great. I actually kind of like that. Like I want to do that, you know. So
yeah, and again, it's just one of those things. It's become it's kind of become this reaction of postmodernism. And again, I mean, there's honestly, like, there's a lot more to postmodernism to unpack. We're not going to get to it tonight. So, but that's like modernity and postmodernism in a glimpse right there.
Yeah.
Yay.
That's good. That's good stuff right there. I don't know. It's very, I don't know. It's very interesting to me just that again, not to make this about Power Rangers. I hate to do that.
Always.
But a guy, there's a channel.
Everything relates to Power Rangers.
Well, and it's a big deal because they just had Power Morphicon a month ago.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Which is every 2 years.
Did you go?
No.
Oh my goodness. But you're famous.
I am sort of starting to hit a little bit of notoriety.
Yep.
Yeah. But
our own Casey DeRemus is
famous. That's right. But yeah, so they just had this convention, so like it's kind of been like a big thing. But there's this channel that started, and I found it's always funny because there's a couple channels of people, like I kind of make friends with people here and there who do Power Ranger stuff, and one of them, I got talking to him. He's a super nice guy and just seems like just such a good guy. And it's like, where are you from? And he's like, I'm from Davenport, Iowa. And I'm like, I'm from like the Peoria, Illinois. We're like, oh my God. You know, it was like kind of funny. Like, oh, we're Midwest guys. But another person, they made this sort of documentary and they just started their channel. And it popped up and they're from Chicago. Like I saw a Bears jersey in their video and I'm like, are you from Chicago? They're like, yeah, I live in Chicago. Like, hey, what do you know? But they did this whole, it's like an hour long, so I'm not telling people you need to watch it, but they go through a lot of just, you know, fan stuff about, you know, the show. And then they ask people kind of this whole, what do you think about when people say it's just a kid's show or whatever. And that's always an interesting reaction because I love that I could just share it with my kids. Again, I'm kind of in the traditional realm. So it's like now I get to watch this thing that I enjoyed and I get to watch my kids enjoy it. So it's fun. Yeah. But they eventually kind of get around to talking a little bit about mental health and all that. And they had, I think it was like 5 or 6 different people that are actors from the show throughout the last, 30 years.
Yeah.
And there was like 6 of them who said, well, I'm a Christian and I keep myself grounded in my faith and I go to church every week and they've laid it all out as like, this is how I do it. And like one of the guys talked about, he's been in a later season, but he did the show and then he's married and has a kid, and him and his wife, he said, we prayed about it because we're trying to determine whether or not my wife could be home. Could we afford it? And then he got out of nowhere. He got called by Star Wars and they asked him to be a stunt coordinator.
Yo.
And he was like, he's like, I don't even know how they got my number. Yeah. I don't know where in the world, because we prayed about it. And the next day I got the call. And so then then they could afford for his wife to stay home. Yeah. And they're really, really grateful for that. But it was cool to see those people like not hide their faith or anything or care. They just were like, they're very open and willing to talk about it. I thought that was really cool to see. I just feel like, I don't know, it's cool to see that we're starting to see that more. Because for a while there, I feel like it was very like, you better not admit that you're a Christian.
Now look, everybody, I just like to point something out. You can either be with Power Rangers, which I understand you might think isn't that cool, or you can be with the cool kids and hang with P. Diddy.
That's true.
Who is going to prison for doing all kinds of really terrible things.
Yeah, and trust me, there's a few Power Ranger actors who are gone to prison for a few bad things. I mean, it's been.
Did they hang out with P. Diddy?
Not to my knowledge. There was one guy who did technically murder someone. The claim is
I love how you're like okay, so you guys can't see this, but I'm just watching his facial expressions, and he's like trying to dance around like, well, he technically
killed somebody,
you know,
which isn't funny, but the whole thing here's the funny part, which it's not funny for the victim.
Driving on the street and the guy hit my car.
The whole thing, it was self-defense is what the verdict. It was self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know how many times someone's attacked you or attacked me, but the amount of times
all the time
I've like protected myself by running a samurai sword through a guy's gut, it hasn't been very often in self-defense.
Happens to me all the time.
But that was the verdict, as it was self-defense. He did go to jail for a while, but it was self-defense.
Okay. So, I know this is a Sam Prairie's podcast, but now I have to know what what was he like? Oh, I'm walking home, saw somebody behind me.
No,
I had my samurai sword.
No, honestly, I read through this like case online, all the public files and stuff. And the more I read, the worse it looked. It just looked worse and worse. This guy was notoriously not easy to work with on the show. He had a big ego. It's funny because after he was on the show a few years later, he went on this really, really trashy like dating show. Like if you think The Bachelor's trashy, this was like 10 times worse. Like it was really bad. And he was on that show, and I've seen a clip of him, and he was just, man, he was, about what you would expect in a trashy show. He was just not great. And actors have all said he was rough to work with and stuff. Well, he apparently was the whole thing was he was running away from Hollywood. It was kind of like he was like done with Hollywood.
Yeah.
So he moved out to this farm where it was like for rescue animals. And so, the person who owned it, he basically said like, well, I'll live out there and I'll take care of the animals. And she was like, okay, that's because she couldn't be there all the time. So she's like, okay, great. So he did that. And apparently there was a lot of sketchy stuff. She couldn't really tell what he was doing. Like she thought he was doing some sketchy things. So her brother, this lady's brother, came and lived there. There was multiple houses and stuff.
Sure.
And he came to live there kind of just to make sure nothing was going on. And apparently they got in some sort of argument, and the guy came, the guy who was the actor went into his room, and the guy was like bust down the door. This other guy, I guess they were in some huge fight. The guy bust down the door, and the guy, he had a samurai sword in his room, and he stabbed him. So that's the story. But if you start reading the details, it's like there's a lot of very sketchy stuff. Like he called his dad after that, who was a retired police officer, before he called the actual cops to report someone. And he he never like tried to claim he didn't do it. So yeah. I mean, it'd be pretty hard to hide that you stabbed someone with a samurai sword. But it does beg the question: why'd you call him first? I mean, you're probably freaked out, so I could kind of understand that. But it's like it's just. It
sounds like a whole lot of shady stuff going on.
It was very
there.
shady. So I mean, no, Power Ranger people aren't perfect, but to my knowledge so far, no sex trafficking.
No P. Diddy hangouts.
No. And
honestly, that's good.
And honestly, a lot of the people who are like more recent people who have been on the show or young actors, there's just a lot of them that have been pretty vocal about their faith, and it's been kind of cool to see that because there's sort of a push to make the show a little more woke, quote unquote.
Oh yeah.
And they haven't really gone too extreme or anything with that, but to see people, just these actors, kind of just. Not that they're being overbearing, but they're just saying, I'm a Christian and I believe in this. And so that's cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So complete like stream of consciousness here. Because I look down, and have you ever done this where you're wearing goofball socks and all of a sudden you like look down and you're like, oh yeah, I'm wearing those.
Yeah.
And I know that's super weird and super random, but I'm wearing Dino Nugget socks.
You have Dino Nuggets?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I got them from Christmas. For Christmas. They're fantastic.
That's awesome. I would love a pair of those. My kids would go nuts. They would love that.
That's right. I got Dino Nugget socks. Just saying.
I mean, if you're a parent, you got to have a lot of love for Dino Nuggets.
Oh, you really do. You really do.
Those things have saved me more times than not. And actually, ironically, I've gone to the store a few times in the last week, and I keep forgetting to get Dino. We're out.
Oh,
I keep forgetting.
No. That's the worst when you run out of Dino Nuggets.
It's been really bad.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I don't eat them very often, but when I do.
They are good.
They are.
They are tasty. Yeah.
Ketchup or ranch?
I do ketchup.
Ranch all the way.
You do ranch?
But it's got to be good ranch. I don't want no awful ranch.
Yeah. Are you a Hidden Valley?
Is the buttermilk.
Buttermilk. Wow, you go buttermilk.
Oh
okay.
yeah, I like the buttermilk.
You are from Buford, Missouri. That's for sure.
Yes, I am.
I feel like there's a lot of buttermilk in
and
Buford,
I'm proud
Missouri.
of it. I eat my Dino Nuggets with buttermilk ranch dressing.
You know, I wonder how many people at St. John's are big buttermilk people.
I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. It's very interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I go ketchup. I like ketchup. Sometimes I go barbecue sauce.
I can do barbecue. I can do ketchup too. I mean, look, I can do ketchup or barbecue sauce. But
yeah,
you know, if you put a plate of them in front of me, and you're saying, "What are you going to dip them in?"
Mm-hmm.
Ranch.
Interesting.
Just like curly fries.
You do curly fries and ranch?
You know it.
I didn't.
You do now.
I do now. Where do you?
It's fabulous.
Where do you get the curly fries from?
Well, I mean, look. If you're going to do Arby's,
right? You don't do Arby's sauce?
No, I do ranch because it's delicious.
You know what? Okay, this is probably
now. I want you guys all to realize, and you too. Like, I don't do this very often,
right?
Because if I did, I'd weigh like 5 gazillion pounds.
Only in moments of weakness.
You know, only in moments of weakness. But yeah, no, I love ranch. I love.
I will say when it comes to Arby's sauce, I do have a small story that when I was going to ISU, I got a really bad habit of you grab something to eat on the way home. Because it's a 45-minute drive or whatever. And so I went to Arby's one time and they said, "Do you want any like sauce with your meal?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want I want some Arby's sauce." They're like, "Okay." And of course they gave me my bag, no Arby's sauce at all.
Oh man.
And I was in the store and in the restaurant and I went back up and I go, "Hey, can I have a cup for water?" And they're like, "Sure." They gave me a cup and I went and I filled up the whole entire cup of Arby's sauce, which actually was way better because I was driving home. So I could just put it in a cup holder and I could dip it. And I kept that. When I got home, I put saran wrap over it and I used that a few more times, which I felt bad because that was a lot of Arby's sauce. But I also was I don't think I was a great person when I was going to ISU. Not that I did anything wrong, but I was just not in a good headspace because
now remember what we've talked about: self-reflection and sanctification.
Yeah.
Right. So here you go.
I was in a negative place. I wouldn't say I enjoyed college that much when I went to ISU. So I was always kind of being pretty negative. So I was just at that place where I was like, they asked me for Arby's sauce, or they asked me if I wanted it, and I said yes, and then they didn't give it to me. So I could care less whether or not I take a cup full of Arby's sauce, and they feel upset about that. But honestly, I don't think any of those people would have cared had they seen me. Actually seen it.
Probably not.
So it was just like, whatever. I don't know. But that was my. I do love the Arby's sauce. Oh, I can't believe you don't get Arby's sauce.
Nope.
Oh, it's so good.
Well, it probably is.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good reason for me to avoid it. I don't want too many things I love like that in my life because then I will weigh like 1 million pounds.
Ah, well. Yeah.
So I'll stick with my ranch.
Yeah.
Stick with my ranch.
I'm sure it's much better for you.
I didn't say that. Didn't say that. It's definitely not better for me, but meh. I'll do the best I can.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's time.
Is it time?
For our final, yeah.
All right. It's time for
Church Chatter.
All right.
I like you did a breath there. I don't think we did a.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Done that
we oh, man.
That was good.
We got so down.
Going to add that next time for myself. Okay. Anyway.
Oh, man. Actually, to be honest with you, we had our big German meal this past Sunday for Consecration Sunday, which was really awesome. It was fabulous, as it always is. And, looking ahead, actually, October, We got some cool stuff coming here and there, but really, the big stuff happens in November. November 3rd, we have our toy show, our hobbies or whatever it is. We're gonna have displays. We got some people signing. I'm really excited about this because it's really a great opportunity for whether you are 5 or 105. Like, it's perfect. Like, come on out. Like, we're gonna do it from like 9 to 10:30 or something like that on a Sunday morning, November 3rd. Going to be exciting. I wouldn't say this is a set in stone date yet, but we are leaning towards our Harvest Fest being on November 9th. Oh. Now, that's actually a Saturday night that we're going to do that. But for those of you that remember, one of my trees came down the other year.
Oh, yeah.
And actually a limb came down. Turned out the whole thing was hollow. We had to cut it all down. I shouldn't say we. I say we like I was a part of this.
Yeah.
Like, no. There was a lot of people that were very awesome that did a lot of great things. Mm-hmm. I was not one of them. Like, I stared at them and go, man, these guys are amazing. Look at what they do.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are going to burn that bonfire. And it's going to be huge.
That's exciting.
It is. It's super exciting. So we're doing it on a Saturday night. We're going to have our normal Harvest Fest stuff. It's going to be great. Come. I mean, we'll probably have some pumpkins to decorate. We'll probably have some butter to make. We'll probably have some stuff to eat and a huge bonfire to boot.
Ooh, that'll be fun.
So, yeah, hopefully you guys can take a time to join us for that. But, yeah, those are like the big things coming up.
Yeah.
And those are all like November. So, again, October kind of slows down a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, not a ton. Still got stuff to do. Still busy. But, like, just some of the stuff kind of slows down.
Yeah.
And we had our, because it has been a few weeks, we had the bazaar.
Oh, yes.
10 to 1.
Your noodles?
I got 2 bags this year.
Oh, very nice.
2 bags. So I'm sitting pretty right now, stocked up for winter. I'll be able to make soup at least twice.
Yeah.
Which isn't going to do it because I'll probably end up going to the store to buy more noodles, which is never the same. But
I'm assuming they're probably sold out.
Oh yeah, they're sold
out.
I'm
sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, they were sold out in like an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. Hey, you snooze, you lose.
I know.
That's the way it works with these bazaars.
Yeah. I understand.
Yep. Yeah. So anyway, so that's like the news, kind of looking at what's going on, what's coming up, all that kind of fun and exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So.
I will say, because they would probably appreciate me saying this, but at Our Savior, they have a craft and vendor fair they started last year. And so this year it's on Saturday, October 26th from 9:30 to 2:30. So they got food station food trucks or station food truck is going to be there. There's a coffee thing going to be there. And they got a bunch of vendors and stuff. So
yeah,
be nice. Maybe if people need holiday shopping and they miss the bazaar,
only if they miss the bazaar.
Only if they miss the bazaar.
Yeah. Well, sounds like a great time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Be excited. They're pretty fired up about it. So I mean,
well, good.
Be good. Yeah.
Good. Well, all right. Well, that's all I have for us tonight.
Got too. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, everybody have a great week. Have a great time. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.